Hello everybody, and welcome to this rather explosive event called C4. Has everybody had their kangkong yet? Tonight we're going to be here to launch the C4, which stands for the Center to Combat Corruption and Cronyism. As an average Malaysian, I think I'm beginning to be numb by all these figures quoted about corruption in Malaysia. Nowadays, Malaysians, when we talk about corruption, we rattle off figures like 12 billion, 200 billion gone out of the country, 300 billion or whatever it is, as though it was just so much kangkong. So I did some research, my version of research, on the internet to find out exactly how much 1 billion really is. Do you know how much 1 billion is? According to this website that I went to, if you started counting now, every second, 1, 2, 3, and didn't stop counting to sleep or eat or shit, and counted from now until the day you die, you would not have reached 1 billion. That's how much 1 billion is. But for the people in charge of our country, it's like nothing. So I'm very glad that you're all here tonight to participate in the launch of this Center to Combat Corruption and Cronyism, which has a very appropriate acronym of C4. I'm sure Cynthia thought about that long and hard before she came up with the name. Now, before we start with the actual presentations and speeches, I'd like to draw your attention to a little video that has been produced by the C4 people. It's a video that will be launched on the internet and shown on roadshows and so on and so forth. And tonight is the first time that it's being shown to a public audience. Anybody going to start the video?
Rakyat biasa. Azman bekerja di sektor swasta. Pendapatannya cukup untuk menyara hidup dan menampung keluarga. Hidup Azman sangat gembira. Sehingga muncul tangan-tangan hitam yang silih berganti pagi dan petang, siang dan malam. Tiada apa lagi yang tinggal. Nanti apa lagi? Oh no. Tapi Azman tidak putus asa. Dia cuba mengadu dan cuba meminta bantuan ke sana kemari, ke hulu ke hilir. Tapi sebaliknya suaranya yang dilenyapkan. Welcome to Malaysia. Ini semua kerana rasuah. Tahukah anda betapa seriusnya rasuah di negara kita? Kapal selam, pelabuhan kapal, macam-macam ada. Wow. Uyo. Dan Malaysia juga terkenal di peringkat antarabangsa. Ya, mereka ambil rasuah, tapi ini semua duit kita, duit cukai kita. Jangan biarkan ini berlaku kepada anda. Bertindak sekarang.
Okay. Now, this is the moment, friends. This is the moment. We've been working to try and establish C4 for the last couple of months. So this is the moment, and I'm really glad to see an almost full hall. There's still some chairs to fill, but I'm also told there's a traffic jam. So we hope that by 8 p.m. this place will be full, because this is a message that we want to send to our political leaders that this is it. This is the center that has arrived. Together with the rest of civil society, we will combat corruption together. So let us welcome C4 into the fray with an explosive applause. The most explosive. Now, many people have asked me, including some of the pre-launch interviews, what? Another NGO? You all got nothing better to do. Well, the truth is, this is not going to be just another NGO, but this is something work in progress that you and I and all of us gathered here, and much more outside this room, will actually need to make the central focus of our agenda, because we believe that this administration of ours, this government of ours, has actually been playing too many games with us until this Kangkong thing has arrived to show how ridiculous the whole situation is. Am I right? Yes. Ayo, yes, and all that. It's like not even energetic. Now, what does this represent? What does this represent? This represents a very special time that we are in, a post-general election moment when we find the government bullying us one after another, not just by implementing more unjust laws, as we saw in the last parliament session, but now it's payback time. It's payback time because they have started to increase the prices of goods, they have started to implement taxes without actually reducing other taxes, and they continue to mock us with Kangkong, with the fact that even when harga barang turun, we don't praise them. But actually, our welfare is not very much in their hearts. And what happens is that we keep reading in the press one story after another about some minister's daughter's wedding being celebrated in grand style. Some minister's birthday party being celebrated in so much splendor that he had to spend 120,000 ringgit doing that. Now, this is a question of living beyond their means, and it is something that we're angry about. They tell us to tighten our belts, and they continue to live lavishly. Now, this is an issue that we grapple with on a daily basis. This is something that has become a reality for all Malaysians. Now, what has that got to do with corruption? Now, living beyond the means in terms of public servants, in terms of ministers, is just one of the many aspects that we are concerned about. We're also concerned about the fact that many of the mega scandals that plague our country today. I was just trying to brief Pak Eri in that short time that the video was on. Pak Eri is our speaker from Indonesia and a former Indonesian anti-corruption commissioner. He was asking me what scandal is this and what scandal is that. We have the PKFZ. Does anybody know who's responsible for the 12.5 billion ringgit that was lost? Do we have an answer?
They're all
No.
innocent.
Do we know what happened to the Scorpion 540 million funds that was paid to Perimecca? Was that legitimately used? Who actually benefited from it? Who pocketed that? And then we have the famous NFC. Now what happened to that? We got the whistleblower being dragged to court. And we know that there is no whistleblower protection in this country, even though we have an ACTA. So there's something seriously wrong here. Who actually is responsible? And who needs to actually be accountable? Is there a justice system in our country that can actually allude to the fact that the corrupt should be punished and the corrupt will be punished? I think not, because no one seems to be responsible for all this money. And whose money is that? It's your money, it's my money, it's our money, and we have no idea what has actually happened to it. Now this is the context. This is the context why many of us came together after the post-general elections scenario. There were people who were saying, yeah, so disappointing, let's just get back, do our own thing, let's go overseas, let's study, let's go work with some big corporate firm somewhere overseas. This is the time to get our lives back together. But believe it or not, there were so many people out there that said, hey, something's really wrong here. If we don't work in the next 4 years or in the next 5 years to actually repair the damage and repair the situation that's going wrong with our country, we are going to be headed for even worse times. Now, one thing is for sure, and one thing is for certain. It's really difficult to prove corruption. So why are we all here? What are we doing here if it's going to be really difficult to prove corruption? Especially corruption among the powerful, the elite. How do we catch them? We can't catch them. It's difficult to catch them. But I think the only answer lies with us. We have aspirations, we want a clean government, but how do we actually get to doing that? And my statement for today is that we cannot depend on anyone. I see a number of MPs, even the Selangor speaker is here, which is very promising because we know that there are people in policy-making positions who take this issue very seriously. But at the same time, we know that we have to depend on ourselves. We work with them, but we only have ourselves to depend on. We have to come together. We have to make sure that our government is actually accountable to us. And just a quote from Thomas Jefferson, it says, every experience has shown that even under the best forms of government, those entrusted with power have in time and by slow operations have perverted it into tyranny. Now we must make sure that although we see some semblance of things happening over and over again, and very much so with a government that has been in power for the last 50 years, this has definitely been converted into tyranny. And this is the era, this is the scenario in which we are living in. Now I just want to point out one example. Let's come out of Malaysia for a while. One example. Let us look at India. Let's look at India. There's so much going on in India in terms of mobilizing people power and empowerment to actually fight and combat corruption. Now, India is a very corrupt country, as much as Malaysia is a very corrupt country. But from a movement, there is now a political party which fights corruption as their main agenda. It's called the Common Man's Party. It's an interesting name because they want the common man to actually be at the center of fighting corruption. And this is the message for today. It is you and I that actually have that responsibility to fight corruption. Now, this party started to develop so much appeal the membership started growing, but it's no way that the party would be able to make inroads so quickly. But the point here is that they won the local government elections in New Delhi, and even the chief minister's position, which is incredibly difficult in the context of such a vast country with so many people in there. But this has given us hope around the world. This has given us hope because if we can have politicians focus on combating graft and giving citizens participation and democratic participation a new life, a new hope, then I think this is something that we can do here. The launch of this center is like a drop in the ocean of a much bigger struggle, of a struggle that we actually have to live through for a long time. We have to gather here today. We have to gather in various different places because I believe we all represent a bigger phenomenon. We want to promote citizenship politics. We want to make sure that the decisions made are all transparent. And we know now that it isn't. We have a Freedom of Information Act in Selangor and Penang, but to be honest, I really don't know where that is at the moment. We are not utilizing it. YB Rajiv had actually put a test case to it. I hope you got your information. Yeah, and the onus is on us because in order to have information, in order to test the borders, we actually need to make sure that whatever has been promised to us is also delivered. Now, the challenge is enormous. I'm not saying this is going to be easy. But one thing I want to emphasize about C4 is that it will focus on two things. It will focus on public sector reform, which means we will look at public money. We will look at how our money is being spent, how our money is being abused, and how taxpayers' money is being actually utilized by the government. It will also work to ensure that we take on more work outside Kuala Lumpur, Petaling Jaya, Penang, Ipoh, that kind of urban centers. We need to actually start working with semi-urban rural people. We have a director from Sabah. He is unable to be here today. So there is also going to be a greater emphasis on Sabah Sarawak as well as the east coast of Peninsula Malaysia, which means we need to go out, and in order to do that, this center and the work to fight corruption, there are various other NGOs that fight corruption, but together with civil society organizations, with politicians, with academics and the works, we need to actually develop our mass appeal. So for many people who actually say, is this going to be another talk show? And we end it here? Let me say no. Because I think this is just the beginning. We will need to actually take the work outside. Now, as I was telling you just now, I need to end this speech by thanking a whole lot of people, because during this downtime, during this time post-general election, everybody feels that, okay, it's time to take a break. There were many, many people out there who said, no, let's work at things, let's get it going. And the energy around what is now called C4, before we were registered. And yes, we are properly registered, and guess what? We have the name C4 in our registration. Okay? I think after this, maybe whoever wants to register as C4 probably cannot do it. Okay, so they did not, well, whatever, but we have a very firm registration. I just want to thank several people because the energy is what I want to celebrate here. The energy is what I think we want to celebrate here because each one is precious and each one actually pushed each other to say, okay, let's develop this center. Now first I'd like to thank my fellow energetic people who agreed to be directors. We have Ahmad Farouk, is also the deputy chair of Bersih, so he's going to be responsible for a lot of street rallies and bringing the public out to express their discontent, because per se is really all about electoral fraud and about electoral corruption. So the agenda is very linked. Richard is a former Transparency International director. Simon Sipao has a very large portfolio. He's the former State Secretary of Sabah, and he is also the former Deputy Chairman of Suhaka. And then we have advisors. Advisors don't formally come under C4, but they are extremely important because they offer different skills. We have Ambiga Srinivasan, thank you for saying that. We have Edmund Bong, I don't know where he is, he promised to be here. We have Razlan Hadri, another very, very renowned lawyer, but he's in Australia at the moment and he offered his apologies. We have C.K. Ng from the private sector and whose contributions have been quite tremendous. We have former ACCA chairman, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, he's a public chartered accountant and former MPPJ councillor. So he knows a lot about public sector works and so on and so forth. So there are a couple of other people who have expressed interest to help. In the meantime, I must say thank you to the video team. There is Luna, who actually drew the logo for us. Do you like the logo? We'll flash it up for you again. Then we have Meg from Ifazil's Boys, if you all can recognize his voice, from Ifazil's Boys. Durian FM for doing everything almost for free. We have Patrick Teo to lend his incredible voice tonight. We have Pushpan Murugaya, who helped with the write-ups. I think you picked up a couple of documents on your way in. With Nathan and his team for doing all the FB, Facebook work for us. And finally, we want to thank Malaysia Kini, because this whole launch is riding on their public forum. It really is because Malaysia Kini as a media organization also works on good governance issues. So we thank them for giving us that space. Now we will be working with a whole lot of different organizations with MPs. And I must tell you that there's work in progress to build an anti-corruption coalition. That's coming up. So you're going to see even more energy around the work to combat corruption. But I'm not going to say anything more in order not to preempt that. So again, the task ahead is really difficult. Another quote from my favorite Nelson Mandela: difficulties break some men, but it makes others. And it always seems impossible until it's done. And that message is for us. It really looks like it's really bad times now. But it will make us. It will make sure that we don't break. And it will make sure that this kampong, even though it looks like you, will be our symbol to show that we are enthusiastic, we have energy, and we will continue to show the people in power who are the bosses. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, to do the launch officially, it's my great pleasure and honor to call upon somebody who really needs no introduction. Please welcome our guest of honor, Ambiga Srinivasan.
Thank you very much, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Cynthia, for giving me the honor of, it's a good word, isn't it? Launching C4. I wasn't sure whether I was qualified to do it, but here I am. When I was in Hong Kong 3 or 4 years ago, I remember hearing a speaker there who briefed us on the business environment in Hong Kong. One of his strongest selling points for doing business in Hong Kong was its zero tolerance for corruption policy. What a powerful selling point that was. And I was envious because they had that selling point. It's a selling point we don't have. In a paper presented by the Assistant Director of Operations in the ICAC, one Jeremy Lowe, said this: before 1974, Hong Kong was plagued with corruption. It was endemic within the police and other disciplined services. It existed within all departments of the government as well as in commerce and industry. The people of Hong Kong were rightly angered by what they saw: a corrupt society that strangled free enterprise and made a mockery of government and what it stood for. That describes us right now. So what do? They set up the ICAC. I think most of you know what the ICAC is. You know how successful it has been. And they have been working, and I think they started seeing change within about 3 years of their setting up. A US-based heritage foundation, according to this writer, rated Hong Kong as the world's freest economy for 13 consecutive years, most recently in 2007. One of the reasons for awarding this honor, I don't know whether it happened after that, one of the reasons for awarding this honor to Hong Kong is that the Heritage Foundation considers Hong Kong virtually free of corruption. Now, that is outstanding. And that is what we should be aspiring to. Ladies and gentlemen, we really, what's happening in Malaysia? What do we have? We are signatories to the treaty. You know, we are. To the Anti-Corruption Treaty, the UN treaty. We have an MACC. We have the Integrity Council. We have various bodies that are set up. We have a minister who is in charge of these affairs, who was formerly from Transparency International. Pity he's not here. Did you invite him? You didn't. You did. Okay. But the point is, outwardly, we appear to have all the necessary structures. The MACC, it is claimed, is set up the way the ICAC has been set up. Which is partially correct. We have the advisory bodies, etc., that are there. So what's missing? Why are we so low on the corruption index, when in fact, outwardly, it appears as if we have all the necessary structures to get it right? In other words, we appear to have all the hardware. What's missing is a very important piece of software, and that is political will. There is zero, in my respectful opinion, zero political will to really get to the root of corruption in this country. And that's where our problem lies. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we can pick up pointers from other countries like Hong Kong, etc., and we have tried to set up, or it appears as if we have tried to set up structures similar to them. But we miss that very important element. And I'm afraid that's where the problem lies. The problem lies with our leadership. There is absolutely no leadership in relation to corruption, in my view. Now, how do I explain this in simple terms? What I'm trying to say is, when Hong Kong says they have zero tolerance for corruption, they mean it. When we say it, we don't mean it. It's as simple as that. And of course, I am a believer in leadership by example. If you had read the article by Dato Sri Nazir Razak a couple of days ago, on how particular his father was about the use of public funds, you will know what I mean. Those were the days when our leaders were acutely aware that they were dealing with public funds, when they dealt with taxpayers' money and monies that rightfully belonged to the Raya. That is what I am talking about. And in fact, if you look at the papers written about Hong Kong, they talk about the important role the government played. They in fact say that if it wasn't for the government pushing it, the government's determination to clean up, it could never have happened. So that's the vital part that we are missing in Malaysia. And it's a problem. That is the main problem. Now let's be very clear, and I think Cynthia has said it. By all the recent surveys we have seen, Malaysia is a highly corrupt nation. We cannot run away from that. To a point where some of the surveys have shown that Malaysians actually accept as part of their life that they have to bribe to get things done. And that's a terrible state that we're in. When we come to a point where we accept corruption, that's time for C4. Then it's time for C4. So what do we do with this problem? As Cynthia has said, we C4 it. It has to be done. We have no other way. This nation will suffer if we don't take things into our own hands. So C4 is civil society's response to corruption. It is civil society's response to institutions that do not work, that should work but do not work. Now, we cannot really stand by and watch while the fabric of our beloved nation is torn apart by the scourge of corruption. And make no mistake, there are many who believe corruption is not really my problem. You know, I'm carrying on my daily life, it doesn't affect me. Wrong. It affects you from the minute you wake up. Because when you leave your house, when you get in your car, petrol, when you leave your house, you're talking about MRT, you're talking about contracts, you're talking about things that you have to pay for, toll, etc., etc. It affects every single part of your life. And that is the problem with corruption, and that is why it is difficult to eradicate. Now, of course, we all know about the Auditor General's report. That comes out on a yearly basis, and I don't know what happens with it. I don't know whether people are actually charged. You have a clock, Cynthia mentioned it, the clock, the $100 clock that we paid $3,800 for. That is ridiculous. But we keep hearing this year in, year out. And we still don't see any concrete steps being taken to eradicate these sort of instances of corruption. Now, Patrick talked about millions and billions. Well, actually, Patrick, we've gone to trillions, by the way. I don't even know how many zeros that is. But that's the flight of capital out of the country. And we cannot afford to sit back and do nothing. And that's why I'm delighted that Cynthia and your group of people who you mentioned got together and decided to do something about it. You talked about a malaise, a fatigue that appears to have come upon us after the 13th general elections. Yes, there was. There was a little bit of fatigue. But we were entitled to rest for a little while. But no more. That little while is over. We cannot rest. A lot of people assumed that after the 13th general elections, things would change, things would improve, that the government would be miraculously responsible, would be talking about unity and reconciliation. Well, they talked about reconciliation, but they didn't do it. That's what I mean. They say things that they don't mean. But none of that is happening. And in fact, we watch in horror on a daily basis at the way in which our society is being torn apart. Whether it is on racial grounds, religious grounds, it doesn't matter. Or let me say, it's not being torn apart. Actually, there's an attempt to tear it apart. Luckily, Malaysians have more sense. Thank goodness, Malaysians have more sense. Otherwise, they would have been in trouble a long time ago. From the way in which these divisions are created and pursued by the powers that be. Now, I think it is important for civil society to step up to the plate. It has. And I'll tell you why. For example, in Bersih, we set up the People's Tribunal. And we did that because all the allegations of impropriety in the elections were never taken seriously by the Election Commission. They didn't care. And they're still, I think, investigating the indelible ink. There was the report of sorts that came up. But none of the other serious offenses that were mentioned, including corruption. So our institutions failed us. As far as I'm concerned, the institutions failed us in the elections. They failed us post the elections as well, because they had a duty to investigate all the allegations. They didn't. So we decided we would do it ourselves. So we set up our own People's Tribunal, and the proceedings went on. People came and gave evidence. And where does the People's Tribunal get its power from? From the people. It gets its legitimacy from the people. So as far as I'm concerned, if our institutions are going to fail us, civil society needs to step in. That's how I see C4. That's what C4 is doing. Our institutions are failing us on corruption. So we have to step up to the plate. Our institutions fail us on crime. We have to hire people to step in. We have civil society movements that deal with crime. So you see this happening over and over again. Now, MACC. I don't know if there's a representative here. I gather there is a representative here from MACC. Pardon me if I'm forthright, but my own view is MACC has completely failed to address the problem of corruption. They go after the small fish. The big fish, as we have just seen recently, get off the hook completely. Now, one of the things that MACC keeps saying, and we see ministers and leaders and others having lavish lifestyles. But MACC always comes back and says, sorry, we can't do anything about that. There's no report, there's no real, we can't see, under the Act, we don't have the powers to do anything about lavish lifestyles. In Hong Kong, they introduced a provision, and it goes like this. It's called the Special Power of Investigation Against Disproportionate Assets or Lifestyle. And this is the wording. A government officer who possesses assets disproportionate to or maintains a lifestyle incommensurate with his or her salary commits an offense unless he shows that he acquired those assets legitimately. So the onus is on you. If you have those assets and lavish lifestyle, the onus is on you to show you acquired all of that lavishly. And that is a powerful tool and weapon that they have in Hong Kong. And I think MACC should really be looking at legislating that. I actually think MACC already has the power. And this is by Section 7. The functions of the officers of the Commission is to detect and investigate any suspected offences under this Act. Don't you think that's wide enough? Doesn't that sound wide enough to you? For MACC of its own volition to go and investigate. I do not buy their line that they don't have the power to act unless a report is made or unless information is received. So my question is, why does the MACC tie its own hands? Why is it that they don't seem to be taking action against the top brass, as it were? Of course, prosecution powers are not in the hands of the MACC. They are not in the hands of the ICAC, let me tell you that. Their prosecution and investigation are separated as well, and there are good reasons for it. Here, they say, oh, we've done our investigation, we can't do anything because the Attorney General refuses to prosecute. So they hide behind that. But really, is that all they can do? What about pursuing asset declarations? Why can't they insist on all political leaders and all people in positions of power to declare their assets. Penang government does it. PSM has been doing it for the longest time. Why can't we have asset declarations? Oh no, they're scared. You know why? Oh, it'll endanger us. Well, it'll only endanger you if you're a billionaire or a millionaire. That already says a lot, okay? The fact that they're reluctant to do that. Instead, they declare their assets to the Prime Minister. That's not enough. So why can't we have that? Why can't we have a robust approach by the MACC? I've also actually talked about amnesty. I won't go into that too much. But they used it in Hong Kong when they wanted to impose stricter laws in relation to corruption. Now, what am I looking for really? What am I looking for with MACC? It is, to me, it is not good enough to say you don't have the powers. To me, it's not good enough to say it's not your fault. Prosecution is not in my hands. I am looking for an MACC chief who will resign on principle if there is interference with his work. I'm looking for that. I am looking for an MACC chief who says he is prepared to investigate the Prime Minister if he has to. But most importantly of all, I am looking for a Prime Minister who says he is prepared to be investigated and who is prepared to declare his assets. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, I have to say the key word. I have the honor of launching C4. Thank you. 3, 2, 1, now.
Maybe one more round of explosive applause for C4.
Okay, just before that, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of many legislators here, and we can count on you to support us. I see YB Trizakor, YB Rajiv, YB Surendran, YB Hannah Yo, Tian Chua, Ton Huak. I hope I haven't, oh yeah, I see. YB Siwarasa and Dr. Tan Ki Kwong. I hope I haven't missed anyone out. Sorry? Stephen Sin, yes, sorry. You can join us here if you like, you're welcome. Okay, Cynthia wants to end this with a bang, so we decided to sing the Freedom Song. But this song is quite long, so we're only going to do the chorus. And if I can sing it, all of you can sing it. This is after my time, okay? All right. Stand up, yes, stand up. If you want, you can hold hands or wave and dance, okay. Okay, I will start. Sama-sama menjejak mimpi, sama-sama mencari dan menanti segalanya. Bersama kita hadapi, sama-sama gunung didaki, sama-sama turun ke lembah sepi, suka duka bersama dirasai. Okay, that was like Kangkong Layu lah. Let's give it one more good effort, then we can go for tea. All right, 1, 2, 3. Sama-sama mengejar mimpi, sama-sama mencari dan menanti segalanya. Bersama kita hadapi, sama-sama gunung didaki, sama-sama turun ke lembah sepi, suka duka bersama dirasai. Sama-sama, last time. Menjejak mimpi, sama-sama mencari dan menanti segalanya. Bersama kita hadapi, sama-sama gunung didaki, sama-sama turunkan lembah sepi, suka duka bersama dirasai. Thank you very much.
In the region where media companies are collaborating to give Asia a voice. And all of us contribute towards radio and video programs. And we put it on a site called Asia Calling. It's also available on kidditv.com. And it's really about, showcasing and highlighting issues across Asia. The 3-year partnership is going very well. Annie Mulia here is the director of that program. Annie, can you stand up and give a short wave? And this program is actually sponsored, this whole day today is actually sponsored by Asia Calling. I think the launch was really excellent earlier today. We really welcome the Center to Combat Corruption and Cronyism. We all know that corruption is a really big issue. But what we want to do today is not just talk about corruption in general, but a particular type of corruption, that is those involving the powerful. Often when we end up talking about corruption, it's about the guy who's taking 20 ringgit or 30 ringgit, or the guy who's asking for 100 ringgit to get something done, or little bits of money in order to grease the system. But really, from our point of view, it's the problem of corruption among those who are powerful, which actually allows the entire system, like a cancer, to become corrupt. We believe that if corruption is stopped at the highest levels of society, then those who are further down the ladder will be much more hesitant to indulge in corrupt practices. Also, we know that those who are powerful have a higher chance of stopping prosecution against them or charges being dropped. As we have seen in a number of cases recently. Therefore, they have much more of an incentive to actually indulge in corruption. So that's why we wanted to discuss this issue, both from a Malaysian perspective, but also in the region. This is a problem not only in Malaysia, but all over Southeast Asia and Asia. And really, we have 3 very good speakers that we've invited to share their perspective on the issue. We have Dr. Ahmad Farouk Musa, who will be our first speaker today. Dr. Farouk is actually a medical doctor, a surgeon, very accomplished, and he's now a director of C4, but he's also a director of Bersay and also a co-founder of the Islamic Renaissance Front, some very, very important organizations. And we're very happy that he's here to share his view on the issue of corruption. We also have Bapak Eri from Indonesia. Bapak Eri was former chief commissioner of the Indonesian Commission for the Eradication of Corruption. Hope I got that right. A very important organization. In many ways, have led the way in the fight against corruption all over Southeast Asia. His commission has done a lot and gone after people in very high places in order to reduce corruption, and we really like to hear about his experience. And we also have Mr. Han from the MACC, who was very, we actually invited Tan Sri Abu Qasim to join us, but he was not able to join us. And then we also, the Director of Investigations was supposed to join us, but he couldn't make it, so the Deputy Director will be joining us today, and really giving us insight on the strengths and weaknesses that MACC has to deal with, the reality of trying to cut down on corruption in Malaysia, and I think we have a nice discussion about what more can be done to tackle corruption in Malaysia.
I guess this is a very important moment in the politics of Malaysia, because we are basically launching an organization, an NGO, which is basically dedicated to to eradicate what we call cancer in our society, or to try and at least create awareness among Malaysians about this, what corruption and how it destroys the fabric of our society in our country, right? And I think I would like to start this. Can we get the slides on? Yeah. The thing is that probably that we see even among our crowds today that the majority of them basically, well, majority of us here are basically from non-Malays and non-Muslims, right? Probably because there are many factors that contributed to this situation, right? People have been asking, why was it that even in the last, during the last general election, and we were in Brazil, me and Ambika and many others, Richard you as well, we worked so hard. We worked to try to make people understand about need for a change in government, right? And we exposed a lot of wrongdoings of the government and so on and so forth. And yet, all these leakages and corruptions and blatant abuse of power, but still we did not manage to really turn, especially the rural Malays, to have a swing in their vote, right, to change this current government. I think the most important thing is to understand the psyche of the Malay society itself, and probably because they are more sensitive towards other issues, what we consider as very nitty-gritty issues like pork, for example. So during the previous Ramadan, there was this issue of pork chops being served during buka puasa, right? And it created a furor against, amongst the Malays, the Muslims. But when people talk about millions of dollars being swindled through this PKFZ, through Scorpion and NFC and many other things, but it did not really create this kind of anger among the Malays. Right? They are more sensitive about all these nitty-gritty issues than the core substance. I guess that one of the most important reasons was probably because as University of Malaya research has shown that the majority of taxpayers in Malaysia, in fact, it came up to the number of 90% of them were basically Chinese, right? So because the majority of taxpayers were non-Malays, they felt probably, very touched, and this issue of corruption is very sensitive because it's their money, it's the taxpayers' money. And because only Malays contribute maybe less than 10%, right? So, it did not really touch them. So that's one of the things that probably we have to understand about the psyche of the Malay. And this is the thing that we are trying to change the perception of the Malays especially about what corruption and how endemic it is in our society. I think I'll start a few of my slides by quoting from what was said by Lim Kuan Eng recently. Only in Malaysia will buying a car with a 55% discount and saving public money is really worth it, or being probed by the MACC, but not when being buying above market price and wasting public funds. Well, we have a member of the MACC here. Probably he could respond to it. But the thing is that this is very important because, as Dato' Amigas mentioned earlier on, MACC must have the power and must be shown to be independent and must be able to conduct the investigation, and to, even if they do not have the power to prosecute, but they should be able to conduct independent investigation, and they must be seen to be impartial. That's the most important thing, to be seen to be impartial. The thing is that, like for example, let me quote another case, which probably not related to corruption, but how a government agency was being used to be seen as an instrument of persecution by the government is, for example, is the AJ Chamber, right? So how they frame Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim for sodomy and charge him for carnal intercourse against the order of nature, a very archaic law, right? And he was charged under consensual act. You know, he was charged under consensual act. Why? Because they could not manage to find any medical evidence to show that non-consensual act or an act of violence was there. So to ensure that they get an easier prosecution, an easier way of winning the case is to charge him under consensual act. And to me, that was basically a very, how do I say it, an abuse of the power of the AJ chamber. So similarly, in many cases, like in this case of Lim 1A, you know, like without a blink of the eye, the MACC started to probe Lim 1A for this purchase of his car. And whereas we have seen, for example, videos being distributed about how they tried to get hold of Taib Mahmud, for example, let me say, right? For example, and showed how he had misused his position to obtain so much wealth. And even the Independent in the UK, for example, published this news about how funds by the Malaysian government, millions of dollars were being paid to them, to this company in broadcasting company in the UK, and also by the Sarawak government to portray a good image of the Malaysian government and the Sarawak government, right? And yet nothing has been done, and it was reported in the Independent itself. So you know, like because of these cases, and recently this PKFZ case, right, when the prosecution was done very haphazardly, so that as if they were not prepared to go to the case, and then the case was being thrown out. So it shows that, you know, you are not very independent to basically to perform your duties, right? That's the reason why people like us, we don't have trust, right? We lost our trust in government agencies because of these things. So I think this is the most important thing that we have to know. And of course, similarly, like what Dr. Amiga had mentioned about Hong Kong just now, right? We have heard about this, yes. And also the one in the States recently about the movie, the producer of that movie, The Wolves of Wall Street. Yeah, something like that. And you know, how he managed to purchase a luxury condominium of millions of dollars over there. And you know, and you must not only say that, well, there must be a reason for you to obtain so much wealth to be able to do that. And there's so many other things, right? And these are the things that MACC must take into account, and why we are not satisfied with the situation on the ground right now. Well, I think all of us, we know that Malaysia has been ranked as one of the most corrupt nations with the highest levels of bribery and corruption anywhere in the world. That was based on the Asia Pacific Fraud Survey Report Series 2013. Yeah. Sorry. I thought I was linked to my computer. Alright. So, I mean, this was a report, and I think it's a well-known fact. And I'm not coming up with numbers and figures, but I think we should at least understand the severity of the situation we are in right now. Next one, please. And about 39% of respondents said that bribery or corrupt practices happen in Malaysia, a figure which is almost double the Asia Pacific average of 21%. So you see how endemic this situation is in our country. And next slide, please. And of course, the police and political parties are perceived by Malaysians to be the country's most corrupt institutions, based on the survey or the report by Transparency International. And as a person in Bersih, steering committee member before in Bersih 2.0, I mean, we have documented a lot of evidence how this corrupt practice among especially the ruling party, right? They use government machineries during general elections, right? They give out monies, right? They basically during the time just before election, when they were supposed, this government was supposed to be what you call caretaker government, right? They what you call allowed this or gave money for all these projects, right? And millions were being done during that time. And what does it mean? There was no respect about this democracy in this country, about free and fair election. We are not talking about where Malaysia Kini Prem knows about this how this media was being controlled, and how Malaysia Kini until today has not been given the license to publish the newspapers to be circulated mainly to rural areas, right? So the internet penetration is very low in our country, still very low. It is only among the urban societies that have this internet penetration, and because of that, only the urban societies are more aware of this situation, not the rural population. So we need to know how to get across our message to rural population and to make them understand, right, about this situation in this country. The thing is that, the other thing that I think is one of the reasons, right, why that this somehow with the government somehow wanted this the Malay population mainly to be poor is that based on the Merdeka Center report, for example, the majority of household of people with household income of less than $2,000 per month, 2,000 ringgit per month, would be main supporters of the government. So, one way or another, they try to keep, especially the rural population, to be poor, right? Because they know that's their kind of fixed deposit, right? So, and we see all these kind of problems going on. And finally, the last slide. And I think I have to touch about these information leak bans under the newly amended Penal Code, Section 223A, concerning the offence of disclosure of information. Basically allows for the cover-up of corruption, abuses of power and wrongdoings by government leaders and public officials. This is a very important thing. Meaning to say that, with this amended Penal Code, they are trying to silence the whistleblowers, right? It's trying to silence all of us about this matter of corruption, right? And we hope, and I hope that we have the MSAC here to at least, show that, they are independent and they are willing to take actions and to probe against all kind of corruptions, whether they are among the oppositions or the ruling government at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farouk. I think that was very interesting, sets the tone for what the problem at hand is and why the need to break the link between power and corruption. For our second speaker, we have Bapak Ari Riana. As I mentioned, he's a very well-known figure in Indonesia, and really a pioneer about fighting corruption, not only in Indonesia but the region. He also happens to be the director of Maybank here in Malaysia, not in Indonesia, but here in Malaysia. So, he actually knows the Malaysian situation very well. Apa, could you share your experience, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the honor for me, and thanks to the event organizer to invite me in this honorable event. I was recalled 10 to 15 years ago when Suharto fell. I think the same spirit was there. And I think we have to maintain that spirit. As Datu Amiga said earlier, besides political will, there must be a leadership, strong political will from the strong leadership. Although infrastructure physically are there, but the role of civil society, I think that's the more important part, as we can do as civil society. So that's why my title is what the role of civil society in the battle against corruption and in the linking power and corruption. Although the linking power and corruption is a conflicting sentence, as the famous Lord Acton saying goes, power tends to corrupt, absolute power corrupt absolutely. Okay, but we learn each other very well. When I was a commissioner in KPK, we will learn from MSCC. Okay, so don't undermine MSCC. MSCC is our big brother in this case. We learn a lot, we cooperate operationally and in some training activities. And I think we have to maintain. What we have to equip them is how to make them more independent, lawfully, as we did around 15 years ago. So the civil society who made a significant pressure to form KPK. And then KPK, since 1999 until 2002, we did a road show to the parliament members, to General Assembly members, and then in 2001 we began to talk about that. 2002, the law is in place, and 2003 the selections done, and I was one of the 5 commissioners of the first place of KPK. Anyway, back to the title. I would like to touch upon how important the role of civil society. We had a good experience when we achieved a certain level of achievement. Then the corruptors is not silent. Okay? They are trying to fight back. So once you touch, say, parliament members, then they will be fighting us back. So that's where the civil society's role is very important. And we did have plenty of experience on that. Back to the topic, the linking, how the linking power and corruption basically is the political corruption. Political corruption everywhere is not an easy case. And ACC, KPK, and all law enforcement agencies should investigate based on the law, based on the role, based on the penal code, based on what the law says, about the power and the limitation they have. So what I mean is that we have to be patient. We have to be patient. Talk about Hong Kong, we learn a lot about Hong Kong. I understand MACC as well. They took 40 years to be Hong Kong like now, 20, 25 years. Indonesia is even more worse than Malaysia, honestly. Our transparency international index is only 3, where you got 4 point something. It's much, much better. Although our country is much larger and the corruption is very rampant all over the archipelago. But at least we start with something, and what we have to do is how to maintain the spirit, how to maintain the commitment. So I understand that this topic is very difficult topic, and political corruption, campaign finance is something that it's not easy to be a strong case to be investigated by a law enforcement agency. Even in Indonesia, corruption remains a highly complex crime to investigate and prosecute, mainly due to adaptations to modern anti-corruption surveillance methods and higher scrutiny on Indonesian financial institutions. There is likely to be a very high volume of bribes being paid. Now, through more informal channels, which are only detectable by the KPK by virtue of its wiretapping capacity. So when all transactions done through the bank, then it could be traced easily. But when in cash, that's a different ball game. The threat of prosecution does not seem to deter politicians and civil servants. And as far as KPK is concerned, KPK has a mandate not only for repressive measures, but also for preventive. And preventive measures, the soul of this is bureaucracy reform, in which I was the chair of the independent team of national bureaucracy reform. It is not a huge program. It's not an easy program as well. So the same repressive and preventive. And then Indonesia needs to break this cycle by cleaning up its political system. So we have to go back to the political system, to the political laws, to the legislature, to the election law, which significantly covers check and balances, control each other. All the campaign finance has to be recorded properly and has to be reported, disclosed to the public. So the key word is transparency, disclosure. The only way to do this is to scrutinize and improve the existing election funding and contribution regulations, and to strengthen the law enforcement agency's capacity. I honestly should admit that KPK cannot do everything by his own. What they have to do now is how to empower the police and the Attorney General's office. I think the same mission also held by MACC. So in short, ladies and gentlemen, next slide, Annie. This is the KPK duties, covers almost all, pre-investigation, investigation, prosecution. So we don't have to go to the Attorney General to prosecute the case. Prevention, monitoring means monitoring system, administrative system. If there is a hole for corruption, then KPK should suggest the improvement of the systems to the executive or legislative. And then coordination in combating corruptions, coordinating the police and Attorney General's office and other relevant agencies. Supervision is supervising Attorney General's office as well as the police in combating corruption. Next slide, and 2 slides more is about the role and challenges of civil society in Indonesia in fights against corruption. How to succeed to choose the right parliament members. Okay, I think that's number 1. We failed to do that, but we try to improve that this year and years to come. Also, instead corrupt elements of society has succeeded capturing parliament, but using it against the fight against corruption. There were some tries in order to awakening the KPK laws comes from the parliament members. And next slide shows that next slide. High level of state capture emphasis, Suharto regime, repeated efforts to reform the judiciary have failed. So our judicial system, our criminal justice system also needs to improve significantly. And then development in Indonesia is unbalanced. Certain courts such as the Supreme Court, Constitutional Court. Ladies and gentlemen, corruption fight backs through many channels, an anti-corruption system must be at least similarly robust to survive and succeed. So criticizing MACC is okay, but supporting MACC to increase, to strengthen their capacities, I think another issue that I think we have to focus on. Again, political corruption seems to be at the root of every other corrupt practices, in Indonesia at least, and I think universally as well. So the political system must be judiciously cleaned. Well, which is idealistic, but at least we have to targeting it as high as possible. And this is a holistic and comprehensive process that is likely to be time-consuming and need some patience. The strong leadership, again, Dr. Kamiga, and robust checks and balances are required. And the third keyword is the role of civil society in the battle against corruption is instrumental. Number 4, our endeavor. Next slide, Andy. Next slide. MACC cannot fight against corruption alone. It takes two to tango. The private sector bribes government agents, government officials. It takes two to tango. If the government officials did not give a sign, then the private sector will not respond properly. So it takes two to tango. So we have to focus on both. Civil society and private sectors pretty often suspect each other, while what we have to do is working together. So this endeavor is collective effort by all countries' stakeholders. And that civil society means academia, or the activists like this, NGOs, as well as media. Okay? The role of media in Indonesia is very important. Independent media. Now in Indonesia, television channels, some printed media owned by political parties, except one of only 2 or 3, including NE's media, is considered as still independent media compared to others. So ladies and gentlemen, this is the fourth keyword that I want to raise. And the fifth one is the ASEAN member countries' strong collaboration, as we pioneered with MACC since 2003. Is a must. Why? Because it's only 2 years from now. ASEAN community will be there, and all the free goods and services will be go and out within these ASEAN member countries. But that makes the problems more complicated. So the key and the answer is the stronger collaboration among ASEAN member countries. With that, I would like to say congratulations to C4 and thank you.
Thank you, Baba Ari. I think that was very interesting. I think Baba Ari will probably be quite modest. I think he's got a lot more story to tell about how it was really done. But hopefully we'll get some of that later, or we'll have to catch him aside and hold him till midnight until he tells us all the interesting stories. We move along. We welcome Deputy Commissioner Han Chi-rul. I think we need to applaud him because he's very brave to come here today, and I think we have to give credit to both him and MACC as a whole, because they realize the need to engage. Even though it's very difficult, they have a lot to answer for, but they realize they need to engage, and they're quite encouraging and they're quite willing to actually engage civil society. So, Mr. Han, would you like to tell us a little bit about what MACC is doing about it?
Okay, thank you everyone. First of all, I would like to seek your indulgence because I was feeling under the weather for the past few days. But nevertheless, I'm here today. Okay, speaking is not my forte actually, but Because in my line of work, normally I am the guy who asks the questions and other people do the talking. But today I am the guy, you are asking the question, I am supposed to do the talking. You see, I didn't come prepared with any script, I have slides. But knowing the situation, it's quite a heated atmosphere. So why don't I just take the bull by the horn, as they say. Okay. I'm sure you'll be interested to listen to the other side of the story. Now, various questions have been posed and various issues have been raised. Of particular concern to me is, for instance, there was an alleged statement made to the extent that MACC cannot investigate someone owing excessive wealth, not commensurate with his income. I believe the statement was probably taken out of context, misquoted. What was probably meant is this, the MACC cannot ask a person to declare, to make an asset declaration purely on the basis that the person is rich. I think what is meant is that you can't ask someone to, hey, my neighbor got 10 cars, I think the MACC should investigate. That is wrong, because if you have that kind of scenario, can you imagine the MACC will be bogged down with various people will queuing up and tell you that, this guy got 5 cars, I think MACC should investigate him. Now, let me just give a brief explanation on this issue. Now, if my neighbor got 10 cars, okay, if I were to go and make a report to MACC, I suspect this guy is involved in drug trafficking or corruption, Okay. Now, you can't expect MACC straight away, to go to his house, get a warrant, search and see what you can find, That is wrong. Because if that's the case, the law will be open to abuses. Now, what MACC can investigate is, we have to gather intelligence. There must be certain basis. There will be a lot of intelligence gathering that needs to be done. You call this a preliminary, a proactive investigation to be carried out. Now, the powers of the MACC to investigate is based, it can be based on a report or information received where there is reason to suspect the commission of the offense. Now, reason to suspect the commission of offense. If there is reason to suspect the commission of an offense, then the MACC can use all powers of investigation. The law is worded so nicely, Reason to suspect, where the officer has reason to suspect the commission of offense. Not you suspect a commission of offense, Because if you suspect a commission of offense, what is likely to happen is, I give you a simple scenario. Let's say tomorrow KL, heavy flood in KL, someone will just come to MACC and say, hey, the smart tunnel not working. I believe, the contractor engineers who designed the tunnel, must be on the tape. So I suspect there's a commission of offense. I want MACC to investigate. No, you make the law ridiculous. Because you suspect commission of offense. You can even claim, that land, if let's say a flood in KL is due to because of land clearing or the jungle, then you say, because the contractor, they clear the jungle, they bribe this enforcement officer. So I suspect commission of offense. I also want MACC to investigate. Now, you turn the country into a circus, and you want to tell MACC, how come you're not effective, how come you don't charge people? But that is the situation in law. Now, like I say, for MACC to investigate, we have to suspect the commission of offense. The suspicion, for us to suspect, it must be something substantive. Okay? Now, investigate is one thing. The powers to require disclosure of property is another matter. You see, the powers to require someone to disclose an asset or make a declaration under anti-corruption law is that we have to show that there must be reason for us to believe. The word used in law is we must have reason to believe, not suspect, reason to believe One, based on investigation carried out, that property is acquired or held in connection with an offence under the Act. Then only they can get that person to declare his asset. Now, if the person willfully neglect to declare, then that's because under the law we can charge him for false declaration. But as to the offence of having property not commensurate with his income, that specific provision in law, you see, is against based on first he must declare. Secondly, the second lien only applies to officers of public body. It doesn't apply to member of public, you know. Now let's say you have a high corporate relation figure, for instance. We can ask him to declare his asset. Okay, he declare. If he declare everything, he commits no offence. If he fails to declare, okay, if he fails to declare, then he can take a case against him for non-declaration. But there is no provision under the current law. For instance, if he fails to explain how come he is able to maintain a standard of living not commensurate with his income, because he is not a member of a public body. Okay. Now, actually, in the declaration of assets, you know, the situation is like this. An officer of the rank of commissioner in the MACC have reason to believe, based on investigation carried out, property is acquired or held in connection with an offence, can get that person to make a declaration. Please declare your asset. Now, what happened is this. MACC have some bad experience in this matter. Okay? Because the court took the view that, especially in the case of Rusli Dalla, in the case of Dato' Ramli, that hey, it's wrong in law, you know, you get somebody to declare when you have not really shown that an offence has been committed. We have a very bad experience on that. We got whacked by the courts. See? So previously the power was given to the deputy public prosecutor. The public prosecutor was grilled in court as to why a notice to declare asset was given out when in fact the investigation was still ongoing. There was no documentary proof or whatsoever that assets had been acquired in connection with offence. So the law, as it stands, needs to be amended. And you may well be aware that MACC has recently forwarded certain proposal to the government which call for the amendment of this law in line with the law in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, you know, if you maintain, you don't have to show that the predicate offence has been committed. If someone is a public officer, you know, maintain a standard of living, you know, that is not commensurate with his known sources of income, and is not able to satisfy or give explanation that is satisfactory to the court, he commits an offence. Now, MACC, of course, you know, is trying to have this provision of the law. But again, this my personal comment is this: knowing the Malaysian scenario today, we do not want opposition of both sides of the divide, you know, coming to MACC and lodge report, no, that guy got 5 Mercedes. So it may end up a situation, we start up investigating cases like this, you know, is that's my personal view. I mean, this does not represent the view of the MACC. Okay. Now, as to the question of wastage again, you know, okay. Now, there is no specific law to go against someone for wastage. Now, it's not, I'm not in a position or authority to comment on certain specific case, but let me put it this way, you know, there have been certain cases where MACC has, let's say, for instance, you buy a house, suddenly you get a discount. Okay, so MACC actually not investigating how come you are using public funds to pay for that's wrong, of course, you use public funds. But let's say maybe that's not is no good. Maybe that one you're entitled. Let's say you're entitled to buy a house on government money, but then you got a specific discount. Okay, so maybe you're looking into the aspect of why a specific discount was given, to that particular public servant. Was it in connection with his public duties? It is not that we were going going for wastage or things like that. You just no, that is an angle of investigation. Okay, I'm not commenting on any specific case. I'm only giving you a typical example. There are of course certain cases. For instance, a case involved in Sarawak, which is currently done by a specific task force that is set up by the AG chambers. That again, I'm not in position to comment. As the recent acquittals in the court, in the court, and subsequently withdrawal of charges. That again is not in my area of expertise, or in fact I'm not privy to the situation. But it is fair to say this way, a corruption case does not end up with an arrest. It does not end when a person is charged. It ends only when justice is done. Again, justice is only done when there is a proper investigation done professionally, independently, and then you have witness give evidence and give consistent evidence. Then proper and admissible evidence, relevant evidence have been tendered. The accused is given a chance or opportunity to explain his version of the offence. Then the judge makes an evaluation of the evidence and conclude whether a case has been established. That is where justice is done. So, to be fair, we can't say when a case is acquitted, then is something wrong. Is this showing prosecution? Again, that is not fair. I have even my personal experience. Okay, I don't want to mention which case, but I've experienced personal experience. I make certain observations on certain cases. I say, hey, I can't find any criminality but subsequently they even have based on the evidence that I have I say no criminality. Oh, suddenly they establish a task force, they set up. They can even charge people in the end, Okay. So I became a victim also. Hey, you no expertise, but subsequently the case was lost in court. So it shows that it's not that we MAC don't investigate, we investigate. But you see the level of even though, let's say, if I say no case, someone will say, hey, there's case. It's always a matter of opinion. And then, nowadays, investigation for high-profile case, they set up a specific task force. They got a very special task force. They recruit expertise, consultants, accounting experts, chartered accountants to assist in investigation. A lot of resources, time is committed towards this kind of cases. Therefore, maybe I don't blame members of the public. They are not privy to this kind of information. To them, hey, case get admitted, something wrong. This is showing prosecution. It may not be fair. Maybe sometimes you only hear one side of the story. Okay. Then of course, I agree. Of course, there's a lot of survey done. Of course, it's very disappointing to know the results, but it shows that plenty needs to be done. Sometimes happy ending is never ensured, no matter how good our intention is. Okay. Let me fight corruption. Let us be, be very open about the matter. Let us not be clouded about issue. I think we should look at we should look at corruption as an issue. So don't politicize corruption. Now, why I say this is like this, Hey, I don't have a privilege of an office driver. Okay, I go to the airport. I travel by cab. I live in Sumanjaya. I think Sumanjaya. Okay, Sumanjaya, Selangor. So one day my taxi friend, he tell me, he say, Han, I think some of these people, the the hawkers there, they complain now. They are telling me, how come the majlis perbandaran people there, they take money from the hawker, and then the government are not doing anything about it, Hey, we should change the government, My taxi driver, he's more rational, He's saying, actually, which government they're talking about? You answer the question. So that's why I say sometimes, people, hey, I don't be mistaken, I don't support any political party, but when we talk about fighting corruption, let us be open about the matter, and let us, look at it as in corruption is not about who, it is about harm. Okay? In fact, I know everybody here angry, agitated, Hey, you have every right to be angry. In fact, it's good that you are angry. It's good that you have that kind of energy, I feel motivated when I see you all getting angry because, but please channel your fight towards fighting corruption, not fighting the MACC, You don't fight the firemen to come and fight the fire. You may not be happy with the firemen, but firemen is fighting the fire. You take MACC, let me put it this way, If you look at the history of the MACC today, there is so much structural change. They are bringing in people from the civil society, into MACC. Tan Sri, Simon Sipon, a member of C4, heard just now. I was surprised, hey, he is with us in our advisory board. So, but it's good to see, it's good to see the members of your civil society between the MACC. Now, I'll put it this way. If you feel you are not satisfied with MACC, write to our advisory board. They will bring up the issues with the management of MACC. I can tell you, the management of MACC, they meet with the advisory board. Practically, it's every month. It's every month they meet, and a lot of issues are raised in these kind of meetings. And we, as the MACC investigators, we have to give explanation, clarification to members of the. That is only one level of grilling. I am from the investigation division. Okay. 1 year I could take 8 public exams. You know what the public exam is? We have to present the results of our investigation to members of our operational review panel. Why a certain case is closed? Why when we recommend a certain case to be charged, the AG side did not agree? Okay, so you want to have say in the MCC, then work towards having people that you feel can assist in the fight against corruption. Okay, be in the various panels of the MACC. There are currently, if I'm not mistaken, 42 of them. Okay, Tan Sri Navaranan was previously one of us, one of us, as various members from the various prominent members of the civil society. Okay.
And can you wrap up?
Okay. Wrap up. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off like that, but I think that there are a lot of interesting questions that we can come to here from the floor, and then we can come back into the discussion. I think we've had some very good insights. I think Han presented really what's the reality going on as somebody who's on the job every day, trying to do these investigations. Some of the challenges that he faces. I would like to open up the floor for comments and questions. If you keep it brief and incisive and to the topic, really be helpful. And then we can open up back to the speakers to respond. We'll take a few questions and then we will come back to the speakers. Yes, Josie? I think there's a mic towards the back there. So I'm aware of time is about 9:15 now, so we'll go for about another 20 minutes. 30 minutes, yes. Go ahead. You just introduce yourself and ask your question, please. Somebody help her with the mic.
Thank you. I'm Josie Fernandez. Perhaps the most pertinent introduction would be Ex-Secretary General of Transparency International. Maybe Cynthia has given the whistle. I should be doing some whistle blowing. I will not do that tonight. I'm happy that Papa Harry is here, because I spent 7 months with Transparency International Indonesia, and I'm well aware of the work of KPK. Now, you put out some key, what you call pointers that Malaysia could emulate, and I think I would place media freedom as the most important area of work for C4. Campaigning for a truly independent and free media. In Indonesia, I think the vibrant media played a key role in helping KPK to bring a few legislators into jail and so forth. Second would be Freedom of Information Act, which you have and we do not. Some of our states have, but without a federal act, it would be impossible for us to get, for example, and this question goes to Mr. Han, I mean, would you make public the minutes of all the meetings of your advisory board? Because that would be very useful to know, for example, why some cases were never even brought to court. Now, we don't have that kind of Freedom of Information Act. If you look at TI's CPI, Corruption Perception Index, countries that had introduced Freedom of Information Act, such as Sweden way back in 1786, they top the list of countries that are most clean. So without a Freedom of Information Act, it would be almost impossible. Would MACC support civil society for the enactment of Freedom of Information Act? Back to Papa Eri, one more question. What has been the greatest challenge, in Indonesia, not moving up faster enough in the CPI index? I mean, you have media freedom, you have freedom of information, you have a very strong civil society. What is it? I mean, you say geographical, perhaps, but what do you think has prevented you from reaching perhaps the level of 5? And finally, Prem, just to clarify, Malaysia began well in the CPI index with almost 6, and we have gone down to 4. You began with 1 point something, but you have moved up very fast to 3, and you will probably overtake us in a year or 2. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hold the answers until we get more questions and comments from the floor. Would anybody else would like to make a comment or ask a question? Yes, gentleman at the back, please. Just introduce yourself.
Good evening. My name is Kuldeep Singh, son of Durbarat. Minutes of the board. Very interesting. If you listen to CN, Azira, Federal Reserve Bank of America will be releasing their minutes of the meeting tomorrow. Have you heard that? I think that's the only, all these years I've been following the news, world news, it's the only one that I hear releasing the minutes of their Federal Reserve Board. Correct? Is that Federal Reserve Board? The bank in America, the central bank. So Josie was mentioning about whether MACC can release their minutes of the board. Now, I'm just making a comment.
Thanks. Good point. Yes. Siva, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to direct my views to Mr. Han, and I think, actually, thank you for coming here. It's quite a brave thing to do. Your boss should have been here, that's Mustafa, but unfortunately he's not. Now, but just to clear the air on what you've said, Mr. Han, I think nobody, because I think you were explaining how the law works, but I think you were raising issues with due respect, they're really non-issues. Nobody is expecting you to act on the views of some private person. You have to have the reasonable belief. I think that's a given. The question really, I think people want to have answers on is how, and we are talking about persons in public bodies. We're not, the public is not interested about the private wealth of certain individuals. We are interested about the obvious wealth of persons in public office. So that's the focus. I think we should stay focused on that. So the question for a lot of Malaysians is, for example, the obvious wealth of the Chief Minister of Sarawak. Let's, name him. The obvious wealth, which does not commensurate with his public salary. So that is the question. Where is the investigation? You can't, and as you rightly pointed out, you have the law, you have the powers. So he falls squarely within the ambit of Section 36(1) of the Act. It's obvious there is corruption. You have the powers to ask him to declare his assets. Why has the MACC not been able to do that? These are the kind of questions the public has. Nazri Aziz, public wealth. I mean, we can go on, you can name Kir Toyo, the house, $25 million house. Isn't that obvious? You charge for some it was charged, I admit. But that offense was staring at us in our face for years. And what was done? I don't want to put you under the burden of having to explain MACC to us. I'm just raising this so that you understand how public perception is of these issues. Yeah? And if I could just share just one more example. And I know you are working under constraints, you can't comment on specific cases, I don't expect that. But so that you can at least appreciate how public perception is. Although this one is more complex, the fact that the son of the wife of the Prime Minister, who's I think probably in his early 30s, if I'm not mistaken, or mid 30s, just bought himself a $110 million apartment in New York. It's more complex, but surely there should be some connection as to where some questions raised about where those funds came from. Final one, and this is connected to the well-known purchase of the Scorpene submarines. Now, of course, we have had answers in Parliament provided by the MACC that the 550 million payment is above board. It's for contract, it's for services rendered. This 550 million commission, or what we call commission, paid to Paramecas and Imran. But after the French court investigations, it is now a matter of public record all over the world, in the internet, in media publications, that those payments are suspect, that those services do not commensurate to the amount. And another payment of 150 million is now paid to a Hong Kong company owned by the same people, again for non-existent services. 150 million ringgit, which obviously came from public funds. So I'm just mentioning these things. So these are, how is the MACC able to address these concerns? But before I sit on spend just one final minute, I want to thank you for one important contribution I think you've mentioned today, which is, I think maybe something which members of civil society could focus on, which is, as you rightly pointed out, the members of the advisory panel should be answerable also to the public, as part of the MACC. In other words, perhaps there should be more focus by civil society members taking these issues directly to the members of the advisory panel and the other oversight bodies and asking them to explain to the public why certain cases were not taken up or closed as the case may be. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Siva. That's good points. Question, gentleman in the back, yes?
My name is Pushpan. Most corruption, basically the money be placed outside. So your biggest issue is going to be asset recovery. In terms of MCMC, any initiative to make asset recovery much more easier, or perhaps adopting unchecked directly as a measure to have asset recovery? One. Second thing is, you have extradition issues under the power of the Home Ministry. Any move or initiative to remove that or put it under MACC directly? Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, sir?
Thank you. My name is Lal Chan, taking as a member of civil society
as an engineer, perhaps my perspective will be different. I think in the earlier preliminary speeches, it was mentioned that one of the most important things for Malaysia or corruption eradication is the political will. Now, just to go back a little bit, where there was political will to clear up, streamline civil service administration procedures, our immigration, JPJ, registration department have all been streamlined tremendously well under the Bermuda mechanisms so that the general public has less complaints about this. So the small fish part has been taken out and now it's focused into the elites and the big sharks. It's difficult to consider delinking power and corruption in a very short overnight basis. It takes a long time. But when there's a Whistleblowers Act, what sort of confidence would the public or the potential whistleblowers have of being protected under that act? I believe in Malaysia today, there's a crisis of confidence in governance, federal governance, administration, and enforcement. We have, and I've been privy to this, we've got some fantastic policy documents, procedures, and so on. They are so good that they can be quite credibly commended by overseas specialists. But our implementation is virtually not negligible. Now, another point that I find, I think this kind of forum is very good to bring in awareness, but a lot of the kinds that I've been in this kind of forums, we are basically preaching to the converted. The participants here are aware what they can do, what needs to be done, how it's to be done. And the people who prevented the UBA for GE13 are in the rural areas who do not know this. How do we get them? Because until they realize the situation, they are not going to bother. I had a recent conversation at the Institution of Engineers when this guy said, as far as the Malays in the rural areas are concerned, if they get 100 ringgit a month or extra from the BRIM, they don't care how much the politicians pocket themselves, they'll still vote the same party. Delineation of boundaries is one big problem. I don't see how that can be kept out of the question of delinking power and corruption. I hope that the new delineation will be done correctly. But how I think it's necessary is to pass this message to the masses who are not convinced at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we will go to the panel, back to the panel for answers. A lot of them were to MACC and to MAPA. Maybe the MACC can start first.
There are so many comments here, opinions, questions. Okay, I want to question on whether MACC will support the Freedom of Information Act. I'm sorry, but I think you over-dignifying me. I'm really a small fry. I can't possibly answer that question. Right? I think.
Do you personally support it?
I'm really a small fry, literally and figuratively,
So maybe you can answer it on a personal basis.
Okay. Coming back to the question of always wealth of persons, Now, always wealth, what do you call it? Obvious wealth of certain personalities. Okay, now, of course, we cannot expect the MACC, under the current scenario of the law, to make a public statement that a certain investigation is done or not done. We have to bear in mind that investigation can be done overtly or discreetly. So, I think I leave it at that. A lot of things are done discreetly, but you cannot tell people things that be done discreetly. It's only when things are done overtly that the press get wine of the matter. Now, certain cases, of course, is mentioned, for instance, the CM Sarawak case, which led public knowledge. In fact, there was a public announcement by the NSCC that a special task force was set up to look into this case. So, it is an ongoing investigation, and again, I say, I won't get into comment on it. The same apply to the Scorpion investigation. There is a current investigation on. Now, Now, as to the requirements of the members of the advisory board to be accountable to the public, let me inform you about the actual situation as it stands now. Now, every year, the MACC has to present an annual report to a special committee of parliament. This special committee, it consists of members from both sides of the political divide. In presenting this report, the Chief Commissioner of MACC and the senior officers of the agencies are required to take questions from this special committee of parliament. So the MACC Chief Commissioner gets grilled over maybe a period of 1 to 2 days over the activities, cases of MACC included. So this is a very significant check and balance. At the same time, the members of the advisory board are required to give comments, their comments on the annual report of the MACC. Okay. Now, I'm not saying this because I am from the MACC. Today, if I look at our MACC annual report, I feel proud because it really details our achievement. A soft copy of it should be available on our portal. Please take the trouble to read the MACC annual report. Then you will know what we have been doing. The problem today is, of course, we like to comment upon comment. Somebody said someone drove a car, negotiated a pen, and then met with accident. And then someone say, yeah lah, young boy lah, drink too much, without getting the fact. Another fella act lah, ini parental tak control. The fella also actually got no parents, Things like this, everybody add in, and then suddenly the news circulated. It goes out of proportion. So please go through our MACC annual report, and then you will notice that we have made significant progress. I will give you a typical example, for instance. In 1980s, when I joined the MACC, we hardly seized any property that is obtained through corrupt means. We hardly seized a car. A few months ago, in one operation, we managed to confiscate 12 to 14 cars that were purchased to corrupt proceeds. So it looked, in the 1980s, when we arrest an enforcement officer for taking a $1,500 bribe, the whole office or the whole section celebrate, for maybe 3 days. But today, if we arrest an enforcement officer for taking 2,000, 5,000, to us it's nothing, I tell you that it's nothing. It's no longer, it's like, it's part and parcel of the job. It shows, the progress they have made over these years, that even if I'm a judge of certain investigation unit, they perform, I will just say, okay, good, congratulations, that's all. That means there's no kind of, to us it's like a part and parcel, Today, we confiscate property, a lot of property corruption, because we are, the way we work, we are going very multi-pronged. We are going for asset tracing, asset recovery. We not only want to charge people for corrupt offence, we want to take and seize assets that is obtained to corrupt means. We also look into the possibility of investigating people for other offences, not only corruption offences. Okay. Now, as to the question of extradition, again, this is a government policy matter. So at this point in time, there's no proposal in mind to make extradition part of the MACC Act. Okay, part of MACC is the jurisdiction. Regarding the asset recovery, for the moment can be undertaken under our Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act. There's currently a law on this matter. It's only the mechanism and getting the people trained in the asset recovery.
Thank you very much. Apart, would you like to take a few questions?
Yes, the only question that I can answer is about why Indonesia CPI is still low. I think there are many reasons for that, but for sure some significant events makes that very slow. to increase. Number one is when two commissioners of KPK criminalized. You remember that. And number two is the delay bureaucracy reform in almost all sectors, because the survey of perception is perception by businessmen, foreign businessmen, about the public services in Indonesia. So maybe Jakarta is better than Medan, but Medan is still bad, or Medan maybe is good, but Makassar is better, or it's worse, or the other way around. So it could be many reasons. How we speed that up is depending on, again, Daud Ambuga said, leadership, political stronger and consistent political will, and all those good things that I think we, civil society, has to be pushed to the government as well as to the legislators, lawmakers. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a quick question there, wrap up in the next 5 minutes. Apika, would you like to make some points?
Hello. Sorry, my apologies. Again, sorry, this is directed at you. But I was just wondering what you feel about, looking at the ICAC, comparing MACC with the ICAC. Within 3 years, there was tremendous progress in the fight against corruption. They're almost corruption-free now. How do you compare MACC's efforts with the ICAC, or its achievements with the ICAC? And what I would say is this, you talk about the structures and you say you're proud of the achievements. I think there have been achievements. My issue is just not enough. It's like having, if I could take a football analogy, like having a good football team who does all its moves excellently well but doesn't score any goals. It's of no use. The goal ultimately has to be eradication of corruption. So and we want to help you, actually. If you are being thwarted, if MACC is being thwarted by the government or by any political leaders, or there is interference, we will stand by you. But you need to tell us. That's what I ask. Because I don't see the political will, and I think that is your biggest hurdle, actually. But you must admit that hurdle. MACC has to admit that there is a hurdle. Then we can do something about it. Thank you.
Let me put it this way, in fact, on a comparative basis, ICAC Hong Kong in recent years, their performance in fact has gone down. Our commission rate for corruption today is 85%. I believe that is much better than even the rate of the ICAC. And we in fact did a comparison as to the rate at which we complete our investigation papers. Ours was much faster. But of course, we had MACC currently has certain limitations in terms of law as regards to the declaration of assets, like certain cases like involving, like say, wastage, pure public disregard of a public officer's disregard for rules or regulation. That's why we're also pushing for an offence of public misconduct. Public misconduct. We are trying to get an offence of this offence of that enables us to conduct an investigation on a person owing excess property that is not commensurate with income. And MACC is in fact pushing for a proposal that the post of the Chief Commissioner of MACC should be like that of, for instance, the Attorney General. You know, it's like, you know, he should not be, his appointment should be under the federal constitution. See, that is to ensure that the MECC feel confident in doing their work. That the security of tenure is very important, you know, for MECC, and of course we also try to push for the Civil Service Commission of our own, whereby we can recruit our own officers, we can sack officers that are incompetent. So this, any change, amendment to the federal constitution will require the support of both house, members of political divide on both sides. We hope the C4 can take up this issue. Thank you.
Okay, I think last question, then we'll close for the night. Yes.
Ho Chai from the Citizens Network for Better Malaysia. I think there are major weaknesses in the MACC Act. I think the first issue that the C4 should tackle. Han mentioned, you know, some of the limitations down here. You have full powers to investigate. Yeah, Tan Sri Yi always tells us that. But you don't have powers to prosecute. So that has to change. Yeah? There shouldn't be the powers, you know, like in Indonesia, I believe that they have independence to prosecute. But that's one of the key areas. Yeah. The other thing is that there are some strong features also in the ICAC. I mean, like what we talk about, you know, people can be hauled out if they live beyond their means. Now, the Oversight Committee chairman has already pointed it out a few times, yet the government's not listening. These things have to change, right? I think that should be the first focal point for FOSI to amend the MACC Act, to rectify all the weaknesses. Look at the strong features in Indonesia. Look at the strong features in ICAC. But that's the way to go forward. Yeah. I think both sides know. Well, also the opposition wants this to happen. Yeah. The present government says they want that to happen. So what's so difficult to get to change the act to give more powers for prosecution? Correctly, it should be a simple thing. It should be a simple matter in Parliament. Right? There's so many sections there. Section 23, Section 36, Section 50 of the Act. These things have to be revised. So these are the weaknesses there. That's why, you know, I think our CM, Sarawak, he knows the loopholes. You cannot pin him down. So these loopholes have to be removed. The other big thing is that the illicit outflow from the country, we rank number 1 in the world in terms of per capita. Yeah, we talk about 1 trillion in the last 10 years. That's 7 times more than our foreign direct investment. So that is one area I think the MACC should look at. So these are issues, and these are big issues that we have to look at. Right? I agree fully also with the need to have your own commission to build up the same like MACC and staff there. Yeah, you have to have a separate commission to look into that. Yeah, fully give support to that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think the very good points. I think we are about a bit running out of time. I think we can conclude the forum. I would really like to. I think the key points have been brought up, and I think with the launch of C4, I think we have put corruption squarely on our target, And this is going to be a major battle that we will fight in the next 3 years, especially the corruption among the powerful. I think that civil society is very committed to this. So is the independent media. We're very committed to highlighting cases of corruption, and I'm sure MACC, will do its best. Although they, obviously, from the point of the audience, the job can be done better. But the point is also made that everybody has to work together to make sure that there is an end to corruption in Malaysia and in the region.